So everybody just kind of wave and say hello to the camera here. Okay, so this is East Rock Creek Village Armchair Travel. It is February 16th, 2023. We're so glad that all of you are here for our Black History Month Armchair Travel. And I want to thank Roger Glass for bringing this program to us. And I'm so excited that he's going to introduce us to our speaker, Oggi Ogburn. And welcome, everyone.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Shelley, and thank you, East Rock Creek Village, for the opportunity to share what I think is a dynamic book of photographs that you'll be learning a lot about. We're only going to probably talk about maybe 20% of the photos that are in the book, but I think when you see the photos that we do share with you, you'll understand the, why it's such an important document. And as Shelley has said, I'm a board member of East Rock Creek Village, and I really am both proud and impressed by the kind of programs and services that it brings to the community, and particularly our senior citizens. So my family and I are very proud supporters of East Rock Creek Village. It's going to be my honor, first of all, to introduce someone I've known for over 40 years, and Curtis mentioned Milton Williams, who we used to work with, who's another very prominent photographer here in the DC area. But I actually met Oggi through Milton, back in the day, as we say. So, and I've been honored to be able to work with him on this publication. So I'm just going to give you a short bio regarding Oggi, and then I'm going to let him say more about himself. Okay, David Oggi Ogburn, we call him Oggi, is a multi-award-winning photographer, photojournalist, and historian. He has had a distinguished career of more than 4 decades of capturing images of historic significance in music, politics, civil rights, and entertainment. His photographs have been published in trade and consumer magazines ranging from Billboard to U.S. News and World Report, as well as in several photography collection books. His photography has been exhibited at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, the African American Museum in Philadelphia, the Brooklyn Museum of Art, and in Atlanta, Detroit, Montgomery, Alabama, Egypt, China, and the United Kingdom. Oggi has received numerous awards and honors for his photography, including Impact Magazine's Award of Excellence in 1997, the Exposure Group's 2002 Photographer of the Year Award, the Mid-Atlantic Music Alliance's Preservation of Music History honor in 2007. And most recently, in fact, in the past few months, Oggi received the DC Mayor's Arts Award, as well as the Cafe Mocha Legends Award. He has been featured on the History Makers, the nation's largest African-American video oral history collection. Oggi was born in Brooklyn, New York, and raised in Queens, New York, where he graduated from Andrew Jackson High School. He's a dual graduate of Howard University, where he received a BA in 1968 and an MA in master's degree in 1973. So we're going to start off by Oggi, sharing with us what he calls his employment of enjoyment, and how he got into that employment, that career, and then after that, we'll launch into the book and share with you some of the photographs and information in the book. Oggi?
Hi, everybody. Here I come. Well, I really got started in photography. I was in New York, visiting home. I was visiting my, in Jamaica, Queens, and my brother was developing a roll of film. And, it didn't seem that it was that difficult, but my brother was developing it, but he wasn't explaining to me exactly what he was doing. But just as the next day, when I came back to DC, another friend of mine was developing film, but he was more of a teacher. This is developer, this is the stop that, this is the fixer. And, I had just come from New York, was married and whatever. And I had just come from New York, had a little daughter. And I got into taking pictures, and I really fell in love with it when I first started, because I had no idea that photography would take me away. Photography discovered me, basically. Let's get started. Photography discovered me. I didn't discover photography. But once I started taking pictures, I went crazy. And the way Rogers was just saying, I got started at a radio station, Howard University's WHUR. My neighbor, Andre Perry, was the first music director at the station. And music director at the time was a very important position. I mean, everybody from the record companies would go to him to try to get their records played. And so he was my neighbor, and he would say, come over to the station with your camera. Now, I wasn't even good at taking pictures. I was just starting to take pictures. Matter of fact, I developed a roll of film that came out pretty good. And I might have printed a couple of pictures. I had built a little darkroom. Everything that I had to get started in photography didn't cost me anything. I started with a camera that my cousin sent my sister from Vietnam. An old girlfriend had an enlarger from her old friend, whatever. So I had an enlarger, and then one of my best friends had a summer program at RLA, Regional Development Land Agency. His name was Tom Foster, and he wanted me to teach the kids photography in the summer program. And it's really, learning photography is really great when you're teaching it. And, you know, I'm teaching kids, and I'm not that more advanced, really, but I got better, and I sort of like taking it, because even when you're around a young bunch of children in a summer program, there's a lot of pictures, and I was enjoying doing that. And then Andre Perry said that it's going to be Roberta Flack Days coming up, and do you want to, you know, take some pictures for the radio station? And I had my heart up then. I had been teaching photography now. I've been taking pictures, but I was basically doing black and white because I had a dark room. And so when Andre asked me to hook up with the radio station taking pictures, that's when Employment of Enjoyment was born. Because I loved taking pictures, grew up listening to music from the point of view that I was even in a singing group growing up in the high school. You sing in the hallways, and, you know, you get cheers from the crowd. So other than that, though, you know, just it was like everything sort of fell in place. Okay, Andre is at the radio station as the music director. At that time, the record companies would send a record promoter with arms full of records to give to Andre, so Andre can pass them out to the people at the jocks at the station. And what happened eventually, some of the promotions would say, well, look, you know, somebody's coming to town today. Are you available to take our pictures of mine? And once I started doing that for the record companies, it ended up being the Mid-Atlantic area became sort of my market. And I was blessed in another way because BET was also here. And I have to give Gwendolyn Quinn, who is like one of the number of public relations people in America now, she used to call me for all the Arista stuff. And I would be shooting stuff, and then eventually Woody Johnson, then Gwen Franklin, and eventually the majority of the Sheila Eldridge, the majority of the people that was promotion people for the record companies were hiring me. And that's when I was really in employment of enjoyment. And now the reason I say employment of enjoyment, because I have been on jobs where I hated to wake up in the morning. But you know, let's not get into that. We're waking up now, sometimes can't go to sleep when they say you're going to be working with Whitney Houston tomorrow or Sade or whatever. But I have to give Roger a lot of credit for us having a book, because Roger, I won't say it, but he can push it. He can push it pretty hard, and he don't stop. But that's what I needed. That's what I really needed, to have a book out now, Backstage Pass. And everyone that has it or looks at it or has one, I know John has one over in London, and it's just been getting a lot of good views.
Thanks, Oggi, and that's a good segue, because you know, Oggi said I pushed him to do a book, but it was only because I knew about the great materials, the great photographs he had at a time when he was shooting photographs for the record companies and the radio station. I actually was a reporter for a freelancer for 2 or 3 newspapers in town, writing about music and the arts. So I would be in the same places that Oggi would be, and with the same recording artist, and I knew, what his collection was. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I said to him, I said, we got to put this into a book. This is history. We got to document it. We got to make sure it's available for generations to see in future years. And so that's what brought us together, to do this book. My role, was essentially to put together the short bios that are included with the photographs in the book, because both Oggi and I thought it was extremely important that not just that future generations see these photos of these historic individuals, but that they also know who they are and what they did, what they accomplished, because that can easily be lost. So we wanted to go just beyond the faces and the names, and provide some history and some context. So Shelley, if you would, we're going to start the slideshow, and I think that folks will see exactly why this is such an important document and the people in it.
And we also wanted a book that was just more than a coffee table book. We wanted something that people could pick up and learn something from.
Absolutely.
That was important.
Yeah.
And if anyone, if the toolbar from Zoom is in your way, you can minimize it by using the buttons at the top of the pictures of us, the video, and then you can also move around any of the other Zoom toolbars if they're getting in your way.
Okay, you can go ahead. You can move forward. This is the cover of the book. You see some of the notable people on the cover who are pictured in the book, and we'll be talking about a couple of them anyway. That young man you see in the middle there, right above the photography of David Oggi Ogburn. Well, that was Oggi. How long ago was that, Oggi?
1972.
Okay, so that was Oggi in 1972. He was really just launching his career.
Just starting
That's
out.
an old classic camera there. So
yeah,
go ahead, next. This is the inside page where you see a more current photo of Oggi looking very, very classy.
This picture was taken with Daryl Todd, one of the well-known photographers in Washington.
Excellent. Okay, you go next. Oggi, you mentioned that your first assignment was with Roberta Flack, and I think most people on this call probably know that Roberta Flack is both a native of Washington, D.C. and a graduate of Howard University. You want to say anything about this?
Well, Andre Perry said that it's going to be Roberta Flack Day on the mall, but we're meeting earlier at a hotel, and we're going to do a remote from the hotel. Do you want to take some pictures? And I finally got my heart together and said, yeah, I'm down now. I'm ready to try it out. Nervous, of course, but this was the first time I ever did anything for the radio station. And this was Roberta Flack to the left. And I ran into her again at another radio station much later on, where you can see she's a little bit older. But make a long story short, Roberta Flack married a guy I went to high school with for a minute. And so, that's part of my story with her.
Didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Next.
Stevie Wonder came to Howard quite a bit in the early days, because this is one of my early shots of him. Okay, this must have been in the 70s, really. But
Crampton Auditorium, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, right? Crampton Auditorium. And he also went to the radio station afterwards, and I followed him in there and took some pictures. At the time, I didn't even have a flash. I would use natural light and hang out with Roy Lewis, who didn't have a flash either as a photographer. Both of us would be shooting without flashes, but eventually you had to get a flash because you had to get the regardless.
Go ahead, next.
Well, I started out, they were some of the first people I ever shot in the early 70s was Nick Ashford and Valerie Simpson. But I also worked for an organization called Nationally Black-Owned Broadcasters, NABOB. And in one of their events, they were performing. And this picture came out so nice that an artist that I know, he sort of painted it for me. It's not as big, or not a big one, but he painted this picture for me.
Yeah, Joe, and Nick Ashford and Valerie Simpson, for those who might not know them as performers, certainly would know the songs that they wrote for the Motown artists, like Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing, Ain't No Mountain High Enough.
I heard it on the grapevine.
Heard it through the grapevine, which I read somewhere is one of the most recorded songs of all time. I think about 20 people have recorded that song. So as good as they were as singers, they really made their name as recording art, as songwriters. Very much so. Go ahead. Next.
Now, as you can see on the left, I shot Janet Jackson in 2006. And on the right, Janet Jackson hadn't even had a record out. And when she was out promoting her record, she was with her mother. But Janet Jackson, we went to a mall and there was a ton of kids there waiting for her because Janet was, as a young child, was on 2 TV shows. Good Times, I believe, was one of them.
That's right. And Different Strokes.
And Different Strokes was the other one. And she, and you know, and I have to admit, her mother said that she even worked harder than her brothers did. Because actually what happened, there was a big poster of Janet, and Janet would, like, you know, really write her name large on it. Her mother said, "Look, you'll be worn out before the day's over if you're going to be doing it that way. You got to make small, you know, autographs for these people." And like I said, it was McDermott Mall in Baltimore, packed with kids. And I realized, you know, Janet didn't even have a record out, but she was very meek and sweet, you know. But and the mother said she worked harder than her brothers. Wow.
Oggi, the photo on the right, the black and white one, wasn't that taken when she was visiting at Coolidge High School?
Coolidge High School. Yeah. And believe it or not, when I took the picture, Donnie Simpson was in the picture, and maybe the principal or so, whatever. But when they showed this picture was in Jet, they took Donnie out because Donnie was on another radio station, and Jet had their own radio.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that picture on the right is an example of why the book is called Backstage Pass. I mean, you don't capture pictures of famous people, you know, celebrities, you know, in that kind of pose unless you're just kind of hanging out with them backstage. You know, you don't get those pictures, you know, when you're photographing them at the concert. You can go to the next one.
Well, obviously, Bob Marley was a super duper, and when these pictures were taken, he had a record out called Survival, and it was and we took these pictures at DuPont Circle. Matter of fact, Roger, you was there, and I'm really feeling bad that I don't know where you were when I was taking pictures, but Roger was at this particular event, and of course Bob Marley has a large following, and I noticed in his videos where he's in Europe, Germany somewhere, he gets, you know, 5 or 6. They don't let him stop. They just keep him coming back, you know, and he might do 5 or 6, you know, encores. But I noticed he wasn't really that welcome in our community because when he came to DC, he really performed at George Washington. But of course, the African West Indians, you know, they all knew him then. But you know, our community really didn't accept him in the beginning. Move on. That's one of my greatest pictures of Bob. Now, this is when I'm first starting out. You can see the Jacksons, their big Afro time was 1972, 73, 75. And Sheila Eldridge and Milton Allen says, you know, they were students at Howard working under Andre Perry, but they had a little bit of clout because they were able to get the Jacksons to come to the radio station for an interview. And so Sheila and Milton Allen says, David, come to the station. The Jacksons are coming. I'm saying to myself, the Jacksons? What? You know, Oggi was very humble. So when I got there, they had their own photographer. And he's shooting and shooting, you know, and and, you know, I was kind of shy then. I wasn't aggressive. I didn't want to disturb the Jacksons, whatever they were doing. And while I was sitting in the corner for a minute, somebody says, he didn't take a picture yet. And it was my young brother, Michael Jackson, who said that. And that's when I really got some pictures, and I really, some of my best pictures I got with them was the Jacksons, really, at the time. Wow. The Jackson 5.
All right.
Okay, now, I'm at home. A friend of Andre Perry's from California was visiting. So when she went back to California, one day I'm in my apartment and I get a call from a brother that says, my name is Larry Dunn. I'm with Earth, Wind & Fire, and we were coming to Washington. And we heard to hook up with David and Denise. And Andre too, of course. And I was saying, well, come on. You know, so when they got to DC, the piano player, Philip Bailey, and they had a girl with them in the beginning, Jessica Cleve.
That's correct.
And she came, along with the piano player. And we got to be buddies. The next thing I know, we're backstage at the shows. The bottom left, one of my best friends, David Robinson, who I grew up with from high school and stuff, was hanging out that particular night. He knew somebody in the group too. So both of us are backstage. I'm there taking pictures. And as you can see, Maurice is over there listening to the music. And, of course, the ladies, they came on the scene. And that's Philip's head in the back. He had a little cap on. And the other picture was, I was invited by Ramon Bain and Martin Luther King III to shoot the Earth, Wind, and Fire, because Earth, Wind, and Fire was going to let people they're getting ready to have a concert in Washington. And the reason that the Kings are there is they wanted people to register to vote, and when they were running for was the president that I worked for was Jimmy Carter. It was Jimmy Carter was running, and they wanted people to register to vote at the Capitol Center or whatever. But that's why this event went down. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the people. That's obviously Coretta Scott King right in the middle of
Right.
that color photograph with in case folks don't see or recognize it, with
Maurice to the right.
Yeah.
And that's the son, the third, just bending down with
Oh yes.
Johnny, not Johnny, the horn player.
Right. That is the Martin Luther King the third. Yeah.
And to the left with Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor opened for Earth, Wind, and Fire at the time, and the young lady to the left is Diane Kwanda. She wrote this music for. She wrote Rapture for
Anita Baker.
Anita Baker, and that's Deanna Williams on the left. And Deanna Williams has been significant in the beginning of my career to have me show my work in Philly.
Yeah, both Diane Kwanda and Deanna Williams were actually person announcers on WHUR-FM. They were on the air.
Right.
On air talent. We can go to the next one. Hey. Little Richard.
Little Richard was performing at a charity function for the Secretary of Education. I might have forgot his name, but it was at a hotel, and what it was going back to the 60s. So what they had, people came to the event. It wasn't in tuxedos. They were in leather jackets and jeans, and there was a big basket when they came in. They pick up a pair of sunglasses, and Little Richard was the entertainment, along with another group that I used to love, the Shirelles. And what I really was fascinated by when the Shirelles performed, all of these people there, these people that worked in the government and whatever, they knew all the words to Shirelles songs. And of course, Little Richard, you can see he performed, and he's a performer. And one thing about Richard Petterman, I didn't, there's a poem about Richard Petterman that he took care of his whole family being Little Richard. 17 members of his family being Little Richard.
You mentioned the Shirelles. Their first couple of hits were written by Carole King.
Right.
Carole King got her start as a songwriter, writing songs for the Shirelles. That is a little known fact for some folks. Carole King obviously is a major star in her own right.
Yeah, she got the Kennedy King, Kennedy Honors.
Yeah. We can go to the next slide.
Certain people I worked with overwhelmed me even. And when Tina Turner was on the scene, we went to Baltimore and Washington and BET and stuff like that. But I noticed that a lot of her people that was with her, 2 or 3 assistants, never went near her. When we went to the restaurant, and Tina would sit at the table, nobody would sit around her. I don't know why. So Oggi gets up a little hard to say, to talk to her a little bit. And I was saying, like, you've traveled around the world. What were some of the best places that you really enjoyed, and blah, blah, blah. And she says, the mountains of Switzerland, blah, blah, blah. And she lives in Switzerland right now. But also she has villas here and there. And I was blessed enough, like I said, being behind the scenes. When this picture was taken, she was at BET. And I think Donnie and we had 2 co-hosts at the time that was interviewing her. Oh, I have to say, it was one of the hosts, the female host that was at BET, asked her, would she ever get back with, Ike? which was a crazy question. But you know, sometimes people do that when they be in an interview. But Tina Turner was a true diva, and when I saw her documentary, I start crying because I'm with these people and I don't really realize, I'm trying to figure out who I am, who are they, man. You know, when you see these documentaries, there's another one on Quincy Jones, and you know, I start crying because I said, Dad, you have been blessed to be with these great people. And Tina Turner was definitely one of them. And I don't believe she's in good health right now, to be honest with you. I maybe I shouldn't say that, but you know, I think she had a kidney transplant, and she's hanging in there. Let's put it that way.
Go to the next one.
Melba Moore and Van McCoy. I get a call. I'm visiting California. A friend of mine who I was a frat brother at the college. His name was Lockett Arnold, and he was a lawyer for Capitol Records. I was just visiting because I really didn't know that many people in California, but a lot of people from California went to Howard. So I'm visiting Lockett Arnold, and I get a call. I was staying with my cousin, and she forwarded a call from a person that called me from New York, which was Susan Perry, who worked for Buddha Records. So I'm over at Lockett Arnold's house, and I pick up the phone, and Susan says, "Hi, Oggy, how you doing?" I said, "Yeah, I'm doing fine." She says, "How much do you charge? How much do you charge a day to go on the road?" Now, I had never been on the road. We're talking in the early 70s. I'm in Washington. I got a little efficiency. The rent was only $100, you know, across from Malcolm X Park. And so I didn't know what to say. So I said $100 a day. She said, "Well, we want you for 12 days. I said, $1,200. You know, freelance photographers, you know, freelancing anything, artists, whatever. You know, that was a great moment for me. So I said, wow. So when I come back to Washington and I hook up with Susan and them, this is at the Carter Barron. Melba Moore is performing at the Carter Barron in Washington, D.C. And the word I got was Van McCoy was coming to go get some pictures of Van McCoy and Melba Moore. So it was at a time where, you know, I might have been a freelance photographer, but I wasn't the most wealthiest. It was a struggle. I could get Daryl you on it. You know, there was a struggle, you know, sometimes. And so I only had 22 shots in my camera, and my flash would come on every now and then when it felt like it. But I said I could go backstage and get at least a couple of good pictures with 22 shots. So as soon as I get to the place, Melba Moore's husband, Charlie Huggins, whatever, he says, "God, he's on stage now. Get some pictures." I'm saying, "Man, hey, this ain't one of those shoots for be shooting people on stage." So I act like I was shooting on stage. Might have took 1 or 2 pictures, but left me with 20. So when I get back to the room, when the brother comes, he came with a PR guy. When Van McCoy came, Van McCoy had a PR guy with him, Wilson. I might know him. Wilson and one of the Baker twins, who was a photographer, and the Baker twin had lights, you know. He had this big 2.25 camera or whatever, all this fancy stuff. And I'm saying, oh man, I hope he doesn't jeopardize me going on the road with Melba Moore. But the problem he had was he didn't have a wide enough angle lens, and the dressing room was really small. So it got to be a point when I asked Melba's husband's sister was there. His sister was there. So I'm asking him, what pictures did y'all like the best? And they said, we liked yours the best. And this is one of them. You can see messing around. And the other photographer, he's my man too, man, a good buddy. I mean, I learned a lot from Ronald Baker and Melba Moore. Matter of fact, Melba Moore had that outfit on another time. When I sent her that picture, I think she changed up for that show, you know.
I want to say also, Van McCoy is a Washingtonian. He's now. He had a big hit back in the disco era called The Hustle. He had a number of hits, but I think the biggest hit was The Hustle. We can go to the next one.
Wait, before you go.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Well, Van McCoy also wrote songs for Columbia Records. He sounded like Johnny Memphis. And because he sounded so much alike, you know, Johnny Memphis is the one they chose. But Van McCoy wrote a lot of records for Columbia.
Yeah, he was a big. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay, you can move on.
Go ahead.
I didn't mean to stop you, but
that's all right. That's all right.
Now, this was at the Congressional Black Caucus. Congressman Conyers would have a jazz show during the middle of the week. The caucus, big day would be on the weekend, and Congressman Conyers would have a jazz show during the week. And I was blessed in a way to have an exhibit during Congressional Black Caucus Week, and Conyers was having an exhibit, and I was having an exhibit personally at the same time at the Parish Gallery in Georgetown. And what Mr. Parrish did was to go to John Conyers' jazz show and put an invitation on all the seats. And you know, during the Black Caucus weekend, people come from all over the country, you know, to represent their, you know, their congressmen and stuff. And when I had the exhibit, I was seeing guys I went to high school with, cats that I had gone to St. Paul's College for a minute in Lawrenceville, Virginia. And I would say, how did y'all know about this? Because they went to the jazz show and Norman Parrish put an invitation on all the seats. Of, it was the big picture of Phyllis Hyman. You might see that before this is over too, the picture I'm talking about. Okay, and you got Dizzy Gillespie on the left. And come on, help me out.
Lionel Hampton.
Lionel Hampton. No, Lionel Hampton was my father's main boy. I mean, Dizzy was around long too with the bebop, but Lionel Hampton was with the, you know, the vibes.
But that John Conyers in the middle, and the Congressional Black Caucus still has that annual during their caucus week. Still has a jazz program that they have, you know, every year. So I've gone to recent years, free too. So next frame.
No.
This is Dizzy Gillespie again, who he's just on a previous shot. This is a great shot. Go ahead, Oggy.
Dizzy Gillespie at a radio station, you know, catching him without the horn, with making fun or whatever. This is the real Dizzy Gillespie in thought. And this was at the WHUR radio station when I got him. And I believe Ron Sutton, who was a good friend of mine, who did the jazz shows at PFW for a long time, but he also was worked at WHUR. He did sports, but I think they would have won since he was the jazz expert, really. They let him interview Dizzy. And of course, Dizzy is a very funny guy, really. He's very funny to work with, and I really enjoyed. I really feel blessed to be with all these great people, basically.
Yeah, I've actually had a chance to interview Dizzy on another occasion, and he is quite a character as he's known or was known in the jazz world as such. Next one.
Okay, this is our homeboy here. And Buck Hill could have played all over the country if he wanted to, but I guess he didn't want to leave home, and he worked at the post office.
Yeah.
But I anybody that's into jazz or even goes down to the church on Fridays, whatever, I think he plays down there every now and then. I don't even know if he's still alive, to be honest.
Oh no, he's no longer with us, but he did play.
Yeah, but the cat could play.
Yeah, Buck Hill. There's actually a mural. I mean, let me just expand for a moment on what Oggy said. Buck Hill was very, you know, in his youth was an emerging jazz musician who chose to stay in the DC area rather than move to New York or LA, where he probably could have had a career as a jazz musician. So he ended up being a postal worker. He was a mail carrier. And there's actually a mural somewhere down on U Street, down the 14th and U area, I believe it is, on the wall, one of the walls down there, Buck Hill in his mail carrier uniform. So he was called, in fact, we say it in the wailing mailman. He was often referred to because he was a mail carrier by day and a jazz musician in the evening, but chose to stay in the DC area where he could have left and gotten, you know, much more recognition as a jazz performer. Next slide.
Okay, this is sort of like what I was mentioning earlier. You know, when you're around a person like Quincy Jones, fortunately for me at the time, he was promoting a young singer, Tamia, and there was a little bus that we were in. And it just so happened me and him was sitting together and we're talking, and you really wish you had a tape recorder, because he was explaining to me how optics, the new wires that they're putting down now, he was telling me how great it was, how he did a record with Patti LaBelle in America and another guy in England, On My Own, I think was the name of the song. And he was just saying that, well, there's so much wealth from this brother. I mean, I remember when he even worked for a record company for a minute. But then again, when he got together, this was him and Kathy Hughes, of course, you know, they had a lot of good chat together. And Quincy Jones, when you're with a person like him, again, just like Tina Turner, when I saw the documentary, I started crying, saying, "Oh, he was with this guy. He was even sitting next to him on a bus, talking." And I have to admit, even though he was doing the show with the Fresh Prince and the music for this and music for that, he always had a bunch of papers under his arm, when he was carrying. So he stayed busy all the time. And on one time on the bus, he would doze off, a cat nap, and then come back ready to go, ready to get in action. That was one of the other greatest cats, brother, that I ever worked with, Quincy Jones.
We go to the next slide.
B.B. King, this picture was taken at the Nabob dinner, and B.B. King was the entertainment that night. But I had been with him before. We was at a club somewhere talking, and interesting, when you start talking to these musicians about their music and how they got started, I guess they get tired of that. But if you talk to them in an intelligent way, and they say, "Well, this, he ain't just asking a question. He sounds like he really wants to know what the deal." But this brother here, him and Bobby Blue Bland were sort of my blues favorite. And I noticed a lot of times when I shot him, Bobby Blue Bland was be performing too. But at this time, this was at Nabob, and it was just B.B. King by himself and with his guitar, Lucille, I believe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Next.
Okay, this is deep. This here brother here is from Hollis, New York, not far from where I grew up. And on the left is when he first started out. He had he came to a party. He was 17 years old, and he was. I asked him to take a picture, and he had a cup in his hand. So I said, "Could you put down the cup for me?" And he said, "Well, they don't know what I'm drinking." I said, "Well, you're 17 and you're in a club, And so I told that same story to Sister to Sister magazine, and they said that I said that he was arrogant. And after that, well, I was scared to see. I was scared of him after that. I didn't say he was arrogant. I just said, asked him to put the cup down. And on the right was at one of the Nabob awards dinners. And I think he probably got an award. I don't know who gave it to him, but I think it might have been Hammer. What they do sometimes, they have if a rapper's getting an award, they have a rapper give it to him. And I think Hammer was the one that gave it to him. Because I got pictures of them together at the Nabob. Yeah.
Because this is LL Cool J. I don't know if you mentioned his name.
Oh, really? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that's all right. And some of you may know him as he's at NCIS as a special agent, Sam Hanna. Yeah, so he's gotten,
he's gotten over.
He's been very, very successful, coming from like I said, from Hollis, Queens, as a rap artist, and now is one of the biggest TV stars, out there right now. So yeah, he's done very well.
Yeah.
Several movies and so forth. The next one.
Now, this was kind of like a really exciting moment in my life. Now, I just knew, well, Angela Bassett was heavy anyway, and she was getting an award, and the award was given to her by, come on.
Ruby D.
Ruby D, okay. So what happens is, Angela says, "Take this picture of me and Ruby D." And after I do it, my mother said, "Hey, let me get you two together." And I take a picture, and Angela Bassett says, "I want that picture." I'm saying to myself, I hear that all the time. Yeah, I want that picture, right? So what happened was, when I first got there, me and Angela was talking in the green room or wherever it was. And since I worked at the DC Black Rep, I sort of got to know a bunch of actresses who started out at the Rep. And I asked her, did she know Kiki Shepard and Lynn Whitfield? And they all know each other because they all go out for the same roles and stuff. And so what happened was, I come home one night and I lay down on my couch getting comfortable, and all of a sudden I get a phone call and it says, "This is Angela Bassett." And I'm saying, "Yeah, hey, how are you?" That kind of thing. She said, "I really want that picture you took of me and Ruby D." Oh, no problem. I'll get it to you. Where do you want me to send it? And she said, she gave me her agent's address or whatever. And, I framed it up real nice. Definitely had my, autograph on it, real nice, because I knew she was sticking out somewhere in her house special, because she was with Ruby D. Come to find out, when Angela Bassett was up to get her award, she says that I was in Florida, and an actress did a narrative of a poem that really impressed me, blah, blah, blah. And that actress was Ruby D. So Ruby D is sitting there, she hears that, she's bust out crying. She didn't know that she influenced Angela Bassett when Angela Bassett was young in Florida. But that's the way that story went, and that's a great, one of my greatest pictures, really.
Yeah, Augie, when he told me the story initially, he said when they got the call from Angela Bassett, he really didn't believe it was her, because he didn't know, he had forgotten that that Angela could get his number from Kiki Shepard,
Kiki, right.
actually on the Howard with us as well, and Ruby Dee, obviously she's an iconic actress, and I think that pretty much any of the current Black actors and actresses would pay homage to her and would love a picture with Ruby Dee. So we move to the next one.
Okay, well, Lena Horne had been, don't know why. Lena Horne was a superstar to me. And there was at a National African Women's Day, Dorothy Heights organization was
National Council of Negro Women.
National Council of Negro Women. And Lena Horne was getting an award that night. And I was on that assignment. And I was just, hey, look, I was in love with her, but I had met her a couple of times because I have good pictures of me and her. And I remember my daughter said, Doggy, when you take these pictures, don't be looking goofy. So when I took a picture with Lena Horne, I was dressed up at this occasion. It was a Red Cross event, and she was there. And I put my arm around her like she was with me. And my look on my face was, grandeur. And so I didn't look goofy that time, Tracy. And it's a real great picture. Now, Ossie D was at Howard talking with, what's the writer that, your writer, Roger, that wrote The Choice?
Oh, Sam Yet.
Sam Yet. They were together, two writers together. And they were leaving some event that was in the auditorium that I wasn't aware of. And I got this one outside. Both of them was outside. There's other pictures too, but he was an idol also, one of the greatest actors.
And Ruby Dee's husband, Ossie Davis.
Yeah, that's right, Ruby Dee's husband.
Yeah, Ossie Davis, Ruby Dee. They were together for forever.
A long time, right?
Yeah. See pictures of them young. We can go to the next frame. Oh, by the way, okay, go ahead. It's August Wilson and of course Gordon Parks.
Well, I mean, I'd say too much. I don't know how much time we got left. But August Wilson, I had a friend of mine's daughter was an actress, and she invited me to piano player or something. One of his plays.
Piano lesson,
which was on Broadway. And she was in it with Ruby Dee, not Ruby Dee, but Angela Bassett and the other tall brother that's an actor. I can't think of his name right now. And so I go up. I put on rented a tuxedo, and I get on the train and I ride up to New York and I go to the play. And after the play is over, they go to a certain restaurant that everybody goes to after the plays. I can't think of the name. It might be down there somewhere. And so I went there, and a couple of people, being at the DC Black Rep, there was a couple of actors and actresses that I knew that was, be going to these events. And so after dinner, I come back and get on the train with my tuxedo. And when I got back to DC, I changed. I was James Bond for a while with my little tuxedo going to New York to see a play of a girl that I knew in the play. And Gordon Parks, when I first started teaching photography, I got a job at the Department of Agriculture to teach photography 3 hours a week. And then like $20 an hour, which was 2 weeks was my rent and all of that kind of stuff. So I didn't have enough knowledge to talk about 3 hours about photography. So what I did show was Gordon Parks movies, not movies, but documentaries called The Camera as My Weapon was one of them. And that was 1 week that I got by 3 hours without really dealing with no chemicals or anything. And the second week was Edward Stryken, who was a heavy photographer in the models and stuff. But I've met Gordon Parks several times. And the last time I met him was at the Corcoran. And we were talking, I got to know him through Norman Parrish, who had the gallery. And I remember him saying, one of the things, I still love the ladies. And I'm saying that today. I still love the ladies too. That was Gordon Parks. But genius, and a lot of us, I hear one of them, Marty Marr, he's on now. Marty Marr, a lot of photographers used to talk about Gordon Parks that, we stood on their shoulders to get higher. And I know that Marty Marr says that a lot now. And Gordon Parks was the one that was the foundation. And I read his books. Man, he had a hard time. He lived in Chicago. He was from Kansas, but lived in Chicago with well, he became a great photographer. Hard work will pay off.
Very. Howard University just got his collection, which is a very great gift for their research center there. Gordon Parks's papers. Or we can go to the next one.
Yeah. Now, Desmond Tutu, this picture was taken when he was protesting at the South African embassy before apartheid was taken away. And I was just there doing that. And later on, I got a job with a PR firm to work with Desmond Tutu. And I was with him all day. And he was going to have an award ceremony at a hotel that night to give awards to certain people. It was a fundraiser. And one of them was the brother from Philadelphia who was on his way to Atlanta and wouldn't be able to be there that night. And I took a picture in the hotel room with a congressman from Philadelphia.
Was it Gray?
Gray.
William Gray.
Gray. Mm-hmm. And because Gray was going to Atlanta to another event. So, and I also, same picture here, when Desmond Tutu, when we did the PR thing, when it was over, I went to the hotel and I had him sign this picture. I have this picture signed by him, an 11 by 14 and a 16 by 20 frame. And I gave it to my mother for Mother's Day. And when she passed, I definitely went home and got it back. You know, and of course the Colonel Colin Powell, you know, head of the armed forces in America, was a great thing to happen for a brother from the Bronx, who I think whose parents was West Indian, and become the head man in the army. And this was probably at a nabob dinner. He was getting an award, or he was given an award to somebody. I don't recall what that was that night. But Colin Powell, I feel blessed to have pictures of these kind of people, to be honest with you. And
so the next, go ahead.
Okay, no, you can go to the next one. You know, again, all I could say is I've been blessed, because this was definitely one of my idols. And I was really saddened that I didn't get to South Africa while he was still there. But he came here. He would do fundraisers and stuff, and this was one of them. And I was really he came to visit one of the most conservative organizations in Washington at the time when I got this picture. But what happened, to make a long story short, I have a young neighbor that lived across the alley from me, and he says to me that Nelson Mandela is going to be at the hotel. He's at the hotel, and the neighbor worked at the hotel, you know, as a clerk or something. So me and him go over to the hotel. I got my cameras and stuff. We backstage, and I'm trying to work my way around. And all of a sudden, security, not Social Security, but his security, or Washington security, came up to me and says, "What are y'all doing back here?" So my man says, "Well, he wants to take some pictures of Nelson Mandela." "Well, you're not supposed to be back here. You got to be up front." And they escorted me up front. And again, I was blessed again to get this picture of the greatest Nelson Mandela, who would go to jail for 28 years because of what he believed in. I don't know many people that can do that. And heavy picture, one of my greatest pictures. Wow. So you can see my collection overwhelms me. I'll be honest with you. My stuff overwhelms me when I know what I have. Because when you're going through it, you're just going through it. But now during the pandemic, and now you have the time to evaluate your life, really. I've been a blessed individual. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's all right. Next slide.
Now, when I first got into photography, Milton Williams, his wife was a PR person for Walter Washington. So me and Milton, photographers for Walter Washington, first elected mayor of Washington. And so after that, that was my little political thing. And after that, two guys I went to Howard with, Randy Kindler and Bob Washington, they were head of the Democratic National Committee, and they hired me to be Jimmy Carter's campaign photographer. And being a photographer for somebody that's running for president, you got photographers from you're not competing, but you got photographers from all around the world around you, lenses, all kind of equipment around you. But I never was intimidated by any of that, because I had learned and knew I didn't have that much equipment, but I had 135 or 200, and I used the wide angle. When my wide angle was a 35. I didn't have a real big wide angle, and Jimmy Carter. So I go through that, and then you're on Capitol Hill a lot. One of my best friends was George Wilson, who was a newsman. We started out really the same time, and eventually, he got to know all the senators and congressmen. Matter of fact, whenever Rosa Parks came to town, he would let me know because she worked for Don McConyers. And so I was at the Capitol one day with the president and, Dorothy Height and the sister, Shirley Chisholm that ran for president. When in Brooklyn, Shirley Chisholm had the area that I grew up in. And I didn't know that until afterwards, though. But yeah, Shirley Chisholm and Dorothy Height, some great people with Ford. President Ford, yeah, Gerald Ford.
Because Shirley Chisholm, as you said, was the first Black woman to run for, I think, Black person. She was before Jesse to run for president of the United States.
Sure was, yeah.
Next slide. That's her on the left, by the way, Shirley. Okay.
Well, after a while, Coretta Scott King, came to Washington a lot. And in this particular picture, she was at an event where they were at one of the parks in Northeast. They had a brand new statue of the first person that was the head of Mary McLeod Bethune's statue. It's probably the only Black statue in Washington that they have up. I know they have Jody Carter Z. Woodson somewhere else, but this was when they first Black woman to be in a park in Washington. It was Bethune. It was her, Mary McLeod Bethune. It was her statue, and of course, you could see the heavyweight there was Congresswoman. Was next to her, I can't think, but I see Shirley Chisholm on the other side. And one of the things now, I'm leaving Coretta Scott King, I'm going to Harry Belafonte. One of the things that I admired about Harry Belafonte and Sammy Davis Jr. and their other partner, Ebony, the guy that smacked the girl smacked the brother, the white dude in the, you know what I'm talking about. His main boy, they did movies together. Like,
Sidney Poitier.
Sidney Poitier. One of the things that I really admired about him, Sidney Poitier, and Sammy Davis Jr., they were the guys that were bailing out Martin Luther King when he would get locked up. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people wasn't aware of that. And when Coretta Scott King passed away, this would be kind of negative. I don't want to say that kind of negative, but when King at her funeral, he wasn't able. Harry Belafonte wasn't able to speak because former President Ford was coming. No, former President Bush was coming to that funeral, and they didn't want Harry Belafonte to say anything, which I didn't think was cool, but hey.
Yeah, Harry Belafonte to this day is one of the most revolutionary, progressive public figures in this country, and that's part of the reasons why I'm sure he wasn't allowed to speak at a funeral because he would have spoken his mind and made some people uncomfortable, as he's always done. Sometimes even to detriment of his career. So you got to give hats off to Harry Belafonte. Yeah. The next slide.
Well, this is our homeboy here, and what happened one night about him? I guess he's here, and he's on radio quite a bit on Kathy Hughes' station.
Well, he's passed away. He's passed away. Dick
Gregory. Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. So what happened? Well, I got pictures with him at a restaurant. So, but one day I'm working at a hotel, and I'm walking by, and he's speaking, and he says, "One person can make a difference." And when I was walking by and I heard him say that, I backed up. He was talking about. He said, "Just ask Rosa Parks." Yeah, and that was that. And I whenever I do put pictures of him, I always mention that one person can make a difference. All the people on here now, look at it. One of you, all of you, can make a difference. Whatever. And this is when I get my little philosophy in me. See, I also believe you got to empty the cup to fill it up again. So hey, one person, anybody can make a difference.
Next slide.
Man, you got all these great pictures. Wow, my jaws are getting tired. No, the left picture, of course, is with the young champion, Sugar Ray Leonard. I was working with Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali was working with Angela Bassett. They were doing something with a toothpaste commercial. They were trying to get kids to brush their teeth.
Angela Bofield, you mean, on the right?
Angela Bofield, right. Angela
Right.
Bofield is on to the right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that's where the picture from the right came from, because I was working with the Cassius Bar. I don't want to get beat up. Muhammad Ali, and so, you know, I guess when he saw, you know, Angela Bofield, you could see, you know, she's one of them tall, light, fine mamas, like, you know, that he was used to playing, marrying, really. And so.
Anna, you still piddling around out the train.
Oh no, I'm home.
Okay.
You had a busy day.
I did.
Somebody to mute their phone.
Okay, so other than that, though, Muhammad Ali was the greatest. Unfortunately, Angela Belfield had a stroke, and you find several other female singers having concerts in Angela Belfield's name, you know, singing her songs. Angel of the Night. She was under the same umbrella with Arista, with Whitney Houston, really, and the other one that passed away, Phyllis Hyman. You know, they were all under the same umbrella.
It's like they were all on Arista Records.
Right. Yeah. And really, I think once well, I don't know why Phyllis Hyman sort of got pushed aside, and she ended up with Philly International. You know, Leon Huff and Graham. Leon Huff, right? Yeah, Leon Huff
And Gamble.
Other than that, yeah. Other than that, though, as you can see, Augie's call it. This is why I call it employment of enjoyment. It's and I'm saying that in these situations, like I might be the only photographer there, and so these are very special pictures to me. And again, I will really acknowledge and confess that my photo collection overwhelms me when I realize what I have. We're talking about 50 years. I said 40, but it's really been 50. I started at WHUR when they started, and they celebrated their 50th year, you know, last year. And
I think we got. I think it's just one more. There you go. You tell us about Chancellor Williams, because I think most people are probably not familiar with him.
Well, Chancellor Williams taught at Howard 27 years history. And him, along with John Henry Clark and Yusef Ben-Jochannan, were historians that went over the history that already had been written. But they had went over this, what has been written, but they came up with different interpretations. And Chancellor wrote a dynamic book that was called The Destruction of Black Civilization. And his philosophy when he wrote the book was to write from the loser's point of view, what they felt. And in that same book, at the end, he had answers to solve the problems that we had been going through for all of these years, and about how to organize and how you get a couple of people together that have like minds, and you know they get together and they bring in other people that might have like minds but might have a different attitude about certain things, and you negotiate these things, and you could build something. Now there's a family. I was president of my family called the House of Ogburn. And a lot of Chance's philosophy I try to use with the family, but family politics is deep too. But a lot of his politics I sort of carried on in my life. And along with when I met him, it was 1974, I had gone to Egypt and I had read his book. I had gone to Egypt. And when I came back, I'm listening to WHUR radio, and there's a Clint Walker, Skeety's nickname was, he's interviewing Chancellor Williams. So I'm freaking out, like when a book influences your life, because you grow up all your life thinking that you came from slavery. You didn't know that you had kings and queens in ancient times that built the pyramids and a lot of things that would probably be debatable with people. I don't feel like going through that. But so, you know, I got to know who I was. And then I felt that no man was greater than me. And so when I met Chancellor Williams, he was blind. I didn't know he was blind, but I wrote him a letter. And I just came from Egypt, and I read your book, and you influenced me a lot. I must meet you. And he didn't live that far. Now this guy's interviewing Chancellor, and I called him up. Where? How did you know about Chancellor? He said Chancellor doesn't live that far from you. I lived on 19th Street, and Chancellor lived on 16th Street, at a place called it was a place. It was part hotel and apartment, whatever it was. I wrote a letter, and I said I got to meet you. I got to know you. I got to know who Now you got to meet me. You got to. Very desperate letter. So I go around to take it, and I give it to the guy at the desk. And I thought he was going to put it in Chance's box behind him, like at a hotel. But he said, no, you go upstairs and take it to him. Because I wrote on a special delivery line in the beginning saying it's a special delivery. Then he says, take it up to him. I said to myself, man, I'm not ready to meet this man yet. So when I go up, I take it to him in the hall, and he was at the end of the hallway, and I stuck him in this box, and I turned around, I'm running to get away. Before I could get away, he opens the door and says, thank you. And so I didn't hear from him the next day, because I wrote that, I got to meet you. I didn't hear from him the next day. I was hurt. Oh man, Chance ain't called me. And so a couple of days later, I get a call from a good friend of mine now, Kenny Palm, who was his assistant at the time, calls me up and says, Chance will meet you next Wednesday between 3 and 5. So I said, cool. So when Wednesday came, I fasted that day. I didn't want nothing interfering with my brain at the time, not digesting food or nothing. So when I get the chances, I'm there at 3 o'clock on the dot, and I didn't know he was blind. Now, he taught at Howard 27 years, but he lost his eyesight through glaucoma over the years, because he went to Africa for like 16 years doing research, and he sometimes said the bright sun might have hurt it or whatever. So when I'm in his apartment, you see us sitting down together. He tells me right from the beginning, don't touch nothing behind this chair or behind this chair, don't mess with nothing behind that chair. And so I would sit at his feet sometime and read to him. Sometimes I sat on the couch, but I had no problem sitting down there and talking to him. And so what would happen is Chance finds out that there's a doctor in New York that can deal with possibly his eyesight, with his glaucoma. So we pack up and go to New York. And as you can see, I'm at the Empire State Building with him. But the doctor said it was one of the heavy doctors on Park Avenue. They said to Chancellor, I don't think I can help you. So, and he didn't charge Chancellor. Chancellor was a great man, just as great as I guess the doctor was. And he told Chancellor, I don't think I could help you. And behind that, after reading Chancellor's book, I turned everybody I knew on to history, Black history, which uplifted, inspired me, and hope others. And one of the things about doing this today, like I said earlier, I believe in emptying the cup to fill it up again. And it's been very enjoyable to do this, to speak to all of you, to let you know my experience and with a lot of these great people. Because the book doesn't have the stuff we're talking about, but the book is a history of a great time in our history. And thank you, Roger. Thank you, Raj.
Thank you, Oggi. Just very quickly, I put a link for those who are interested maybe in purchasing the book. I put the link into the chat. It's 124 pages, hardcover, large format book.
200 pictures.
We shared probably maybe a third of the pictures at most, in the book. If that, we got about 200 pictures, we probably shared about 30, so
30%.
not even a third of them, quite honestly. So, but it's history, it's, whether you get the book or not is not as important as the fact that you know about the book and you got a chance to hear a lot of stuff about Oggi's experiences as a photographer that I hadn't heard. Some of it I had in our conversations and working together to put together the book. But anyway, on that note, I'd like to open up the floor to questions. Hopefully you have some, so go for it.
You can come off mute, or you can put something in the chat.
I just have a business keeping question. There's a person there with a beautiful face, and it says iPhone, and I'm not sure who it is. He's muted.
Oh, this is Curtis Austin.
No, not Curtis. No.
Sorry about that. Sorry.
You say Curtis. Good to meet you.
Back at you.
Oh well, I sent something in the chat to that person to iPhone too, but
let's get back to the conversation.
Okay, sorry.
Could I just say thank you for giving me the opportunity to visit Black Rock Village and to meet you, Roger. Oggi's mentioned you to me many times, and to meet some of his friends. We have a lot in common, Oggi and I.
Yeah.
We same age. We were both altar boys when we were kids. For most of, Oggi's still called Oggi now. For a lot of my life, I was always called Oggi. But he's a great friend, and I'm very pleased to meet you all.
And John has come to 2 family reunions that the House of Ogburn had. Yeah.
He's coming to us from where? From the UK, isn't he?
Yeah.
What village are you in? I don't even know.
Sorry?
What's the village? What's the name of the village you live in?
Oh, I live in Stafford in the Midlands of England. I've lived in various places, but that's where I am now. Yeah. People tend to think in America. Go on.
Okay, any question? Let me see if there's any
The
questions.
internet is what hooked us up. So we've been talking a long time, since 1995. Okay, who else got a question?
You get the award for coming from the furthest distance.
Thank you.
Are there any of the photos that could folks just share? Did you have a favorite one? Would anything surprise you? Anything bring back a good memory?
Well, if you're asking me, because many of the artists we've seen are very popular in the UK. And, you know, I enjoy, for instance, Little Richard is a great photograph, and kind of a real unusual character, but somehow Oggie's picture of him brought that character out, I thought. But lots of others, of course.
Yeah, it's great.
You got your hand up, Catherine?
Yes,
Go ahead.
what I was going to say, the photography is excellent. What enhances it is your storytelling. That is such an important part of history. And I really did appreciate it. And I saw things that I had, or people I had seen before. I thought about incidents. And so I really appreciate the photography, and especially appreciate the storytelling that went with it. It is history.
It's great.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead. Roger, let me just ask, can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Ron, sure.
Well, Oggi, look, first of all, let me say how much I appreciated your book. I have of pictures, I've looked at it, it has moved me, and I would certainly urge anyone on this call to get a copy. It is historic, it is stunning. One of my favorites is one where you took of Al Green, and Al is performing, and the emotion on Al's face is just palpable. You can feel it jumping off the page. So I was just wondering, what the story was behind your shot of Al Green.
Well, that particular time when I shot Al Green, there's two pictures on that page. And what got me, of course, he gave you, Al Green was a photographer's dream because he knew what to give to photographers. One of the pictures on that page, we can't really see it, but he took his jacket off, and his jacket is hanging, he's singing, and still he's hanging around with his jacket is hanging. And of course, Al Green was one of the greatest blues singer out of Memphis, I believe. He was one of that Memphis bunch. And plus he was a minister for a minute. I don't know if he still is, but I know he was a minister also.
Yes, very much so.
And so he was giving it up in that picture.
Yeah, he was. He was giving it up.
But he's a photographer's joy because he knew what to give us. See, one of the things about me as a photographer, you want to get a picture that's different. You don't want the same picture that everybody else has, or that you've seen regularly. And he was a photographer's dream, because he gave photographers a lot of nice pictures. I really, really did, and that was one of them.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yvonne, you're, let's see.
I was going to ask about Roberta Flack. Did someone mention a tribute to Roberta Flack?
Well, the first gig that I got with the radio station was Roberta Flack Day, which was a big event that was on the mall. But when the radio station had her at a hotel before she went to the mall with interviews and stuff, and they did a remote at the hotel, and because, well, she was from, Roger always said she's from this area. She went, I don't know if she went to Howard, whatever.
Yeah, she went to Howard.
Yes, she went to Howard, taught at Howard.
Yeah, see,
and DC Public Schools.
Right.
She's been diagnosed with ALS, amyotrophic lateral
Yeah.
sclerosis,
That
Lou
came
Gehrig's disease.
Right.
out
The
recently.
last time she got an award, she was in a wheelchair in New York,
Yes.
Queens. And I didn't know that she had anything was wrong with her at the time. But it was a good friend of mine who had a theater group called the Spectrum, and they gave her an award in Queens, and she had a wheelchair, but she was fantastic because Andre Perry, the brother who sort of was at the radio station when I sort of got introduced to music and photography together and called it Employment of Enjoyment. He was managing with Ntume and Reggie Lucas, who did the song with Roberta Flack, Blue Lights in the Basement. She did a song with Donny Hathaway. And Andre was part of the management group when they did that song. And that was one of their greatest songs.
Yeah, she did a number of songs with Donny Hathaway.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm learning too now. I might have been hanging, but there's still a lot that I don't know. That's for sure.
She taught in the DC public schools as well as at Howard. And then she mentored a lot of singers like Peebo Bryson, and she took a lot of younger singers under her wing.
Wow.
And her disorder, her disease is irreversible. So it's very, very difficult.
Actually, she was born in North Carolina.
Okay.
Mountain, North Carolina. I'm a North Carolinian.
There you go.
Taught in Farmville, North Carolina.
Wow.
Anyone else? Questions, comments?
It was a delightful presentation. Thank you ever so much.
Yes, just thank you for such a deep and wide view of the history of this area and your participation in it. It's been a privilege to hear it and see it.
Great.
It was a wonderful presentation. It's interesting to know that we have so much talent around Washington, D.C. area. And Oggi, when were you at Howard?
I started Howard in 1963, and I left in 65 and became a mailman. When you couldn't, I became a mailman for a minute, and then I came back to Howard in 68 and graduated in 68. Came back in 68 and graduated in 68. And so what happened, when I graduated, I went to New York, became a social worker. And I had a major exhibit recently, I call it Employment of Enjoyment, because I've had jobs that I hated to wake up. And one of them was working for General Motors. See, if I'd gone into the service, I might have been able to deal with, I gave you an order, whatever, blah, blah. But that didn't work out too well. And that's when I came back to DC and became a photographer, But I graduated from graduate school in 73. And that's when I taught myself photography.
Right, well, you're fabulous. I love them. And they're not planned. They're just natural photos. I love them. And I was at Howard the same time you were. That's why I was asking. So.
Okay. But I have to say, I learned a lot at Howard, survival, really. When you're a freshman or whatever, whenever you're senior, whatever, and you spend your weekly money, and somehow you got to eat for the rest of the week, you get your roommates together and say, you get the butter, I'll get the SpaghettiOs, and we can survive, Yeah, I learned a lot at school. I loved it. But
this has been a great presentation. Thanks a lot. I'm going to get the book.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a proud owner of the book.
Yeah, you go, girl.
I have friends in high places. That being Roger and Roy.
Yeah.
And Catherine said that she'll share the book with her friends who are part of the South African Support Project.
Wow.
And
we're real appreciative of those who have purchased the book. We got some more steps to go to try to get it more widespread, because again, most importantly, and Oggi and I both have the attitude that this isn't about us, making money and rich. It's about making sure that this rich history, lives on long past, our time on Earth here. So that's what it's been about.
I'm gonna turn off the recording right now. So I just want to formally thank you, Oggi, for sharing your talents and your life work and experience. And Roger, thank you for bringing it to all of us and the world. So I'm going to stop the recording. We keep talking for a few minutes.